Today we're going to talk about the Forge World Imperial Armour Compendium, with some interesting hints of Titan legions, chapter tactics, deathcore doctrines, and newly re-emergent war boss on bike. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the upcoming release of the Forge World Imperial Armour Compendium. This was one of the reveals that Games Workshop did last weekend, and it's good to have a bit of clarity as to exactly how the Forge World rules are going to get redone for 9th. In this video we're just going to talk about everything that we know about the upcoming book right now, and what sort of things still remain to be seen. So at present, if you want to use Forge World models in a game of 40k, the official rule source are the Forge World Index books, and there are 4 of them, one for Space Marines, one for Guard in the various patterns of Knights and Titans, one for Chaos, and one for Xenos. They're also currently out of print, so you can't even buy them anymore. They said that they'd stop making them in January. At the moment you can get the copies through that Warhammer app, or buying a copy of one of these second hand, but they're going to have this big new rulebook coming out that's going to have the rules for literally everything Forge World in one place. It's going to be one big book, which has its positives and negatives. It means that if you're only interested in, say, Forces of the Imperial Guard within it, then it means that you will still be tied to buying the full book rather than just that one section of the book that you might find a bit more relevant, as a hardback book is likely to cost significantly more than those indexes that they came out with at the start of 8th. It is pretty good in terms of book consolidation though. If you do have Forge World models spread out over multiple factions, then it's good to have only one book that you need to be able to use for the rules for all of them. I do suspect it might be a little bit light on the fluff and background sections though. With all of its previous releases of Imperial Armour, Forge World have built up a massive amount of backstory and lore to their various units. It is hard to see how they're going to incorporate much of that into one book if it's literally everything that they've produced over the last couple of decades. In any case, I think it's high time that the Forge World datasheets had a new look given to them. You could tell that in the 8th edition releases for the indexes, the Forge World rules writers had just been a little bit stretched and communication hadn't been entirely ideal between them and the main Games Workshop team. A lot of their mechanics just worked in slightly different and odd ways to the main book, and there were plenty of things that needed fixing with FAQs, which only got worse as more codexes came out that didn't always necessarily take Forge World datasheets into account. Supposedly it's going to be the same rules team that are working on main 40k as are going to be redoing these Forge World datasheets, so any thoughts of power or balance aside, they should at least function fairly well within the game, and it will have been a fresh opportunity to go over each of the rules and try and make them a bit more relevant to the core models that they're representing. Having so many datasheets for so many factions redone all at the same time could really change things drastically for many power levels of factions within the game. At the moment, the vast majority of Forge World stuff is fairly overcosted, though I think that people tend to have the opposite impression just because you often only tend to see the ones that are undercosted actually in play in tournaments and things. In general though, there's only a few notable exceptions that really tend to break through compared with the Games Workshop Codex options. So in terms of what's going to be in the book, we know that there's going to be 191 datasheets, which is actually a significant reduction compared with the amount that were in the indexes. I believe that number was over 300. A lot of stuff is being dropped, as we already knew, and as a rough guide I'd expect anything that didn't get a points value in Chapter Approved 2020 not to be there. That'll include basically all of the datasheets from the Renegades and Heretics and Elysian Drop Troopers lines, which sadly have vanished, and I really hope are going to reappear with some Warhammer Legends rules at some point down the line. There's also many Forge World vehicles and other units that they just don't make anymore, including stuff that they haven't made for absolutely ages, such as the Imperial Guard Griffin tank, but has faithfully had rules for many editions since they stopped. There's plenty of other similar ones to this that they don't make, that didn't get points cost changes in Chapter Approved 2020, for example the Whirlwind Hyperios and the Saestus Assault Ram. Again, I really hope that these rules go into Legends, so people who have actually got the models can still continue to play them in slightly more casual games. In terms of other things that we do know are in though, they confirmed that there will be a new regimental doctrine for Death Corps of Krieg, definitely an army that suffered some significant neglect over 8th edition. It'll be really nice to see them brought up to speed with the Astra Militarum Codex, after waiting 3 long years to have that done. I'd really like it if they just got some basic warlord traits, relics and stratagems to go alongside that. They're pretty much the last index-only army that you can field in 40k, so it would be really nice to see them redone. Another thing that they called out specifically is that there's going to be the Ork war boss on a war bike in the index. This guy's had a really interesting history over 8th edition. He was in the indexes but not in the codexes, yet still had a points cost in Chapter Approved, so there was some debate as to whether or not he could be fielded in tournaments and things. Then his points costs were absent from Chapter Approved 2020, which made me think that he was going the exact same way as all of the other things that they didn't make models for, even though Forge World does make a Warboss on Warbike miniature, although before it has been used to represent Zard Snark Da Ripper, a unique Warboss on Bike character. so technically at the moment he doesn't have a points cost, so you can't field him, but hopefully this book should rectify that. I really hope that he does continue to be able to be used in 9th edition 40k. It's a really solid way to field an Ork character, and it's just the sort of speed that you need to get a stacked Ork war boss with a whole load of scary goblins up in the face of the enemy. In terms of things that are left out, obviously we're losing a lot of datasheets, though I'll be interested to see whether or not some units that did get points costs in Chapter Approved 2020 get datasheets in this book. One case in point is the Death Corps of Krieg Grenadier Squad. Forge World don't currently sell their models, but they do have a points cost in Chapter Approved, so I'm really hoping that they still get rules, as they are really quite a decent troops choice for the Death Corps. One negative that I was kind of hoping there might be an outside chance they might include will be some rules for Adeptus Mechanicus units from 30k, things like their various battle automata. It really wouldn't have been all that unreasonable to survive from 30k to 40k, much in the same way that you can field most of the 30k dreadnoughts. Maybe eventually they'll cotton on to this in the future. It'd be a good way to give the Admech army a whole ton of different options, and probably sell them a whole load of more Forge World resin kits to boot. There are a few other things that I'm really interested to see what comes of them. First of all, whether or not they have chapter tactics for things like Red Scorpions, Minotaurs, and the other Forge World chapters. In the Games Workshop preview video, they gave us a really quick flash of the back cover of the book, and it seems to say that there will be recommended chapter tactics for each of these chapters. When they say recommended, I have no idea exactly how official they'll be, whether you have to run your Red Scorpions like this, or you can still do what you can now, essentially pick any chapter tactic for them, which is really quite powerful. I suspect if they are just recommended ones as opposed to official ones, then it might mean that they just use the Space Marine successor chapter list of options, and pick 2 traits off the list and have them descend from a certain parent chapter. I think that would personally be the least exciting way that they could do it, but it might be the way that they go. I think it'd be quite cool if they did actually come up with something bespoke for them though. Again, any unique relics, warlord traits or stratagems will be appreciated, though my hopes aren't incredibly high as we haven't heard anything about them. Another thing that's got me quite interested is that in the video preview they said that there will be rules for Titan Legions when fielding them in 40k, which at least sounds like it might be some bespoke Legion traits, much like you get Space Marine chapter tactics. I guess it could just mean literally just revamped rules for the Titans themselves, but I suspect it might be something along the lines of knightly households and things. Not going to be all that relevant for any sort of competitive game, as most of these cost the same points as an entire army, but could certainly give you some fun new rules to use if you do feel like using them in big 40k games. Finally, it's going to be interesting to see if they manage to rebalance a lot of the Forge World units, which as I mentioned before I think would involve making the vast majority of them a bit stronger rather than weaker. There's 191 datasheets, most of which just really aren't that good compared with their codex options, so if they really are trying to balance them to be on par with them, then it might mean that we see a lot more Forge World units be the optimal thing to take in certain situations. I do hope that they manage to take the opportunity to address certain problem units for the game though. One of the most obvious ones at the moment is the Relic Contemptor Dreadnought for Space Marines, that's just incredibly undercosted both compared with other Space Marine units and other armies. So hopefully that book will put its slightly bizarre points costing into some sort of new light where it isn't just the obvious best take in a lot of armies. So plenty of interesting developments to look forward to on a Forge World point of view. Still no real idea as to whether this book's actually going to be out. If I had to completely guess, I'd guess sometime in December or January, but as is often the case, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure I'll have my work cut out reviewing the datasheets when it comes out. Thanks very much for listening to another Auspex Tactics video. If you're enjoying, then feel free to subscribe. There'll be plenty more coming out each day. If you have been watching a lot of my videos recently, and you'd like to help keep them coming, then I'd just like to mention that the channel is supported by my Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description below. Channel Patreons get to see a video per week early. There's regular votes and polls to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and channel patrons also get automatically entered into the channel's monthly giveaway, with a chance to win some big model kits and things. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel and keep the videos coming, then feel free to check the link out down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.